What's up, everyone? It's a bright and sunny day here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm here with what I would say is maybe one of the most in tuned beat reporter, writers, Twitter personalities of the Tech baseball program, Chris Hirons. Chris, how are you doing, man?
Good, man. It was about 6 degrees here in Blacksburg, so can't be too worse.
Yep, it's a beautiful sunny day here in mid-February. And of course, when you think mid-February, I think of college baseball starting up, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The Hokies are coming off the best season in program history. It's going to be a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about everything, the preseason hype, what they did last year. We're going to talk about the current roster, guys coming in via the portal, via recruiting, and at the end, where we think this season will end up for the Hokies. First off, I'll just plug everything on the Section 5 network. Hokie Hoops Pod, Sons of Saturday Pod, Queens of the Castle. The Lady Hokies are on a burner right now as they're finishing up the ACC season. Locks of Saturday, we're going to get into some NHL, some NBA, some college basketball action over on that channel. Should be a fun time. Chris, let's recap last season to start this out. First off, it was the best season, hands down, no question, in Tech baseball history. Ended the season with a 45-14 record, hosted the Blacksburg Regional against Wright State, Columbia, and Gonzaga, although never got to play Gonzaga, which I kind of wish they did, but never got to play that matchup, and hosted the first ever Blacksburg Super Regional against the Oklahoma Sooners, who, quite frankly, were the hottest team in baseball all through the postseason, ended up losing in the College World Series final to Ole Miss. The Hokies won the ACC regular season title with a 19-9 record, including overall in the season, a really impressive 33-7 home record. If you haven't seen a game at English Field yet, and you can get to Blacksburg this spring, highly, highly recommend it. You don't get many better atmospheres for college baseball. You can see it if you're watching on YouTube. You can see it a little bit in our background here, but I don't know which more you want. It's a great place to watch baseball. You just pop up a lawn chair there and general admission seating, get you a hot dog, get you some beer, and watch some awesome baseball.
Yeah, $2.50 for a hot dog, $2.50 for drinks. Not a bad deal, especially with non-conference games being free. And then the most expensive you're paying for a ticket to sit in a seat is $10, $5, I think, for like kids that are under 13. It's a great place to watch a ball game. It's almost like a minor league venue.
It really is like a really nice minor league ballpark. And I think what Virginia Tech has done with the facilities, they're saying build it in Blacksburg, literally building it from the ground up. We'll talk about that a little later, but one of the best facilities on campus. It rivals any college baseball facility across the country, even some of the SEC schools. So really great job there. The Hokies also had a phenomenal showing in the MLB draft. Gavin Cross, number 9 pick overall to the Kansas City Royals. He might be working up that farm system really, really quickly. Tanner Schobel was the 68th pick overall to the Minnesota Twins. I got to be honest, as a Cleveland fan, I don't love all these guys being in the AL Central, but congrats to them. Nick Biddison going 135th overall to the Dodgers. Cade Hunter, 153rd to the Reds. Graham Firevet, 16th round to the Baltimore Orioles. And Jordan Gieber signed as an undrafted free agent to the New York Mets. I know our good friend Billy Ray Mitchell, who is a Mets and Red Sox fan, will be happy about Jordan Gieber there. So I think wrapping up last season, it was by far the best season Tech baseball has ever had. What does that mean for Virginia Tech moving forward, Chris?
I want to go back to the point you made of the stadium. They built it in Blacksburg, the $20 million facility they put into it. You're starting to see it pay off. I think you'll start to see it pay off, especially in recruiting, freshmen and both transfers. They had the biggest, the largest amount of signing bonus money that players have received. They had the 5 draft picks make over $7 million combined, which is, the biggest in program history. I think The second most was Joe Saunders when he was picked in 2003. I think he went for like 1.825 million, and that was only one guy.
Mhm.
So I think, it really helps with recruiting for one, because recruits can now see that, hey, if I go to Blacksburg, maybe I can go sign, for $5.2 million like Gavin Cross did, or maybe I can work my way up from being a top 1,000 recruit to go into following Tanner Schobel's route of making $1 million, or even Jordan Geber, who kind of flew under the radar for 4 years and then, kind of peaked at the right time. As the Sunday guy for Tech last season. Now he's out playing professional baseball, made it as high as Double-A last year. So I mean, I think you'll see it start paying dividends for recruiting.
And we have to mention, it's been a while since he's been on campus, but Joe Mantiply made the All-Star game
Yeah.
this year for the Arizona Diamondbacks. So that is something that I think is really hard for baseball and basketball programs, is like get you a guy who's playing in the pros that you can sell to recruits. It's very difficult in baseball, quite frankly, because of all the steps on the ladder you need to get to in order to make it to the big show. I mean, Gavin Cross could be playing in a Royals uniform at some point next year. It's very well possible. So really exciting what they're doing, getting guys ready for the next show. And with all of that success, though, comes some preseason hype that we don't normally see with the Tech baseball program. Chris, so go over all the D1 baseball projections for the Hokies this year.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, last year, I kind of feel bad for, Tech's head coach, John Sheff. He's had so many preseason like media obligations that that he didn't have last year. I think last year it might have been me and Sam Allis for 3304 that were requesting interviews. And, this year, it was hard to get Chef for a one-on-one interview. And I think that just comes with the preseason hype. I mean, D1 baseball had him at 14th in their preseason top 25. And that's kind of the most prestigious college baseball ranking. Last year, I don't think they even thought Tech was even going to make the NCAA tournament, much less host a super regional. And now they're projecting Tech to host a regional. They released that the other day. I think Stanford, they projected them to be the number 3 seed. Obviously, it's the preseason, doesn't mean a ton, but like when you look at it on the grand scheme of things, like they didn't get like this preseason hype last year. Obviously, they were up to as high as number, I think it was like 13 or 14 in 2021, and then kind of had that collapse. And I thought a lot of, the college baseball, like national media probably thought, hey, maybe they're just not ready yet. Obviously, that wasn't the case. They went on that great run last year, and now, the preseason hype is there. They're aiming to make it back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in consecutive years, for the first time since 1999, 2000. It's been a while since there was this much hype going into the season. I mean, even after 2013, when Pete Hughes left after the loss to Oklahoma in the regional, and they hired Pat Mason's staff, there wasn't, hype. They weren't ranked in any sort of preseason polls. So I think this year, you bring your coaching staff back, you brought, most of your team back, which we'll get into later. I think a lot of outlets are, expecting this team to, at least play in the tournament, and not even that, maybe even host a regional or a super regional once again.
Yeah. Not only are they projecting that, but they're projecting it in an ACC that got better this year. I mean, the ACC is only, you could say they're on par with the SEC, maybe even better in some spots. It is a premier conference. What do you think it means for Virginia Tech growing to get this kind of preseason hype? And then to, like you said, a couple years ago, season started out really well. They had some injuries, some guys got in hitting slumps, and it kind of fell apart once they got into the real beef of the ACC schedule. Last year, quite frankly, everyone was kind of waiting for that to happen. We were like, all right, when are they going to have a bad weekend? When is somebody going to go in a slump? And it never really happened. I mean, even in the super regional against Oklahoma was just on fire. There was nothing really that Virginia Tech was doing. What do you think that means the kind of consistency we've seen. And then this is the first time Virginia Tech baseball has really ever had expectations on a national scale.
I mean, I think what it means, I mean, it's a respect that the, national media now has for a program like Virginia Tech. Carson DeMartini, we were talking to him yesterday at the Baseball Media Day. He thinks that this team, the dreams to go to Omaha, he thinks that, maybe this team could be even better than it was last year. Even though you lost a lot of offense, you gained a lot of bats, most of your pitching staff returned. The only guy you really lost was like Graham Fireved. The O's, the other guys, you knew you were going to lose because they ran out of eligibility. But, what it really comes back to is just, national respect that you're kind of getting from everyone, from national media and even the ACC coaches. Last year, I think they were picked 6th in the ACC Coastal. They went on that hot run basically throughout the entire ACC season. I mean, even the Georgia Tech series where they got swept, they lost 2 one-run games. They got walked off twice. And then the Pitt game where they started 0-4, that was still a 1 or 2 run game. I mean, they were just so consistent throughout the entire year. Now, obviously, the injury bug never bit them, and if it did, it was late in the year. But it just goes back to national respect,
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. It's just fun to hear Virginia Tech in this name when you're talking about some of the best programs in the country. Let's do a little bit of a projected starting 9 for the Hokies, and then we'll kind of dive deeper into the roster. There's a lot of new names. There's a lot of transfers, which I think we'll talk about as one thing. John Sheff has done a phenomenal job in the transfer portal. And then we do have to talk about the bullpen, because I think if there's one giant question mark around Virginia Tech baseball right now, it's, do they have the depth in the bullpen? Do they have the depth in the starting? So let's kind of just go over the starting 9 real quick.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I've been hearing from the team, everything that, the players have gone on record about. We'll start with second base and then kind of work our way to the first base and DH at the end, just because those are still kind of up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
But second base, Eduardo Malinowski, he's going to be back. He came back. He had an extra COVID year because he played for Penn at 2 years. They lost their entire 2020 season to COVID. And then 2021, they were only allowed to play, I think, maybe 18, 19, 20 games. So he gets another year. He comes back. And then you also have Christian Martin, who was a Valley League All-Star. He had a good summer this year. So I figure those two will probably end up playing. I wouldn't say splitting, because Malinowski will probably get most of the starts, but Martin will probably factor his way into there, maybe one game a weekend. But second base is locked down. Shortstop is interesting. So you got David Bryant, who's the transfer from Radford. The guy walks more than he strikes out, always puts the bat to the ball, hits for a very, very high average. And then you also got Clay Grady, who I think was, the 757's high school player of the year. He's a freshman. And he'll be here. Sheff was really, really high on him when I talked to him on Friday. He said that he's very coachable. He's kind of the same guy every day, high energy guy, someone you want on your roster. You want to play every day. So maybe think back. He wouldn't compare him to anyone. He couldn't think of any past player he could compare him to, but he could have the same trajectory as Tanner Schobel did, in 2021, where, he was out every day. He played every day for Tech, and then has a great summer at the Cape. Grady will be going to the Cape for, I think, the Harbor Hawks this summer. And then Tanner obviously came and had that great year last year. So I'd expect David Bryant to take most of the reins at short. And then, he'll DH some days. He's kind of one of the older guys. I believe this is his last year of eligibility. And then Clay Grady will play a little bit too. And then if you want to talk about third base, and Carson DeMartini.
Yeah. So with Carson DeMartini, I think first off, this was a guy that before David Bryant transferred from Radford, Carson played shortstop in the Cape League, and he did a really good job. He has all those shortstop skills. Now I think moving him to third base is, one, you get another bat in there, but two, you kind of lock down that left side. of the infield. And I think that's really good for Virginia Tech to have that luxury of not just having to say, all right, here's our star infielder, we have to move him to shortstop. Having the ability to say, hey, we have a really good fielder and hitter at third base, and we have two options at shortstop. That's really, really good news for the Hokies. So you might see some games where Carson plays short. It's something he's been working on, but I think he's your third baseman. And I'm really excited to see that left side of the infield. Think you're going to see some highlight plays there. So Carson DiMartini, a Virginia Beach guy, tore it up in the Cape Cod League this summer. He, projects as a higher round draft pick here in the next few years. Like I think he and Jack Hurley, who we'll get to, they have that star power that can replace what Tech lost with Tanner Schobel and Gavin Cross.
Yeah, and then in the outfield, obviously you'll have Jack Hurley coming back, which we mentioned. The dude's a stud. I think he hit 380 or something last year. He was crazy. And then Carson Jones, who's sort of turned into Babe Ruth, hit 8 homers in his last 12 games. It's something that you only believed it happened because it actually did happen. They'll be back, and then Carson Jones will be on right, Hurley in center, and then Chris Cannizzaro, a transfer from Bucknell. Griffin Green said, or no, not Griffin. Drew Hackenberg, I take that back. Drew Hackenberg yesterday said that he was the toughest at bat on the team. He's someone who doesn't strike out a lot. He always puts the bat to the ball. He's a tough out because Drew said he'll put the ball anywhere and somehow Cannizzaro will get his bat on the ball. And then going back to catcher, Gary Giebel, he'll be there. He'll be Cade Hunter's replacement. He's very high in his defense. And then offensively, Chef said he did take a step. He said he had one of the better falls when I talked to him in the fall out of anyone on the team. So Gary Giebel will be behind the plate. And then going back to first base and designated hitter. So Chef wouldn't go on the record about any of this, but he said that Tackett, Eisert, should factor in playing first base, which would be interesting because Sam Tackett, he's a guy who really only started your non-conference games last year. But Chef did say he had one of the better falls he said he had the best fall out of anyone on the team. And then Eddie Eisert, he was someone who had a lot of scouts watching him in high school, consider that he was going to be maybe a high school pick, ends up going to NC State. He's coming. He didn't get a ton of time. He didn't get a ton of reps at NC State. He comes here. He figures, he'll play a little bit of first base, but he'll also play the corner outfield spots, almost like a Nick Biddison type of player who can kind of play anywhere.
Just wherever on the field outside of pitcher, maybe even pitcher.
Yeah, no kidding. But Eddie Eisert, yeah, he should factor in. He hit for the cycle at Liberty in the fall during one of their scrimmages. And then Garrett Michelle, he'll be very interesting. He's a first baseman, DH kind of guy who the team absolutely loves. They started calling him Babe Ruth because he's, I think, had like an unofficial 9 homers this spring. He's hit his way into the lineup as a freshman. He had a great summer down in the whatever summer league is in Florida. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think Perfect Game runs it. But he had a great summer where he hit like close to, I think, like in the high 300s. But every time I saw Michelle in the fall and this spring, he had a home run. I think he'll be pretty good. And then he'll probably split between first base and DH. And then Brody Done, he'll be interesting too. He's a catcher, but I know the team kind of wants to move him to the outfield. He might DH a little bit this spring. He's this 6'7" guy. He's huge. I consider myself a tall guy. I'm about 6'1", 6'2", but I mean, I'm looking up to him. I mean, he's huge. And his swing is just, I mean, it's so pretty. He regularly tattoos balls at anywhere between, 95 and 105 miles an hour. It doesn't even look like he's hitting it or he's swinging that hard. I mean, that guy, he'll be good.
Talking about the outfield real quick, D1baseball.com, who is the premier rankings outlet, everything. If you see rankings next to a team on TV, it's D1 Baseball's rankings. For their top outfielders coming into the season, Jack Hurley is 5th nationally amongst all outfielders, left, right, and center field. and Carson Jones 39th. So some star power in the outfield. Let's talk about the pitching rotation. Let's first the starters. Drew Hackenberg is a guy getting a lot of hype for this season. I thought he was really good as a freshman last year. We expect to step up still, getting a little better with a little more experience. That's very exciting. Griffin Green behind him. I thought Griffin Green was great most of the year. Struggled a bit towards the end of the year. I believe he had a pretty nasty like finger injury, which if you're throwing a baseball and your finger is injured, that's not going to work out too well for you. He really had to battle through that in the ACC tournament and then through the regionals. And then behind him, Anthony Arguez.
Arguelles.
Arguelles. Okay, there we go. I hadn't taken Spanish in a few years. He's really interesting because you see what transfer from Miami. Thumbs up on that. We'll take that all day. But
dude, he could have gone anywhere.
Yeah, he's not a guy who started a lot of games. And if you know about baseball, being a bullpen guy versus being a starter is a totally different mentality and, quite frankly, a different skill set when it comes to stamina.
Yeah. I mean, so Griffin Green's going to come back. Just get that out of the way. He'll be the Friday night guy. He'll be great again. Drew Hackenberg, he'll be the Saturday night guy. But Arguelles, he's kind of your X factor. I mean, you watched it with Jordan Geber last year. They weren't winning. They were taking the first 2 Sunday games. And then all of a sudden, Jordan Geber gets this start at Miami, and he pitches pretty well. They end up losing. But the Boston College game that Geber started, they end up winning. They swept that series. The Louisville game that Geber started, it was a Sunday game. They lost the Friday game. They took 2 out of 3. They won that series from Louisville. And then the Duke series, they ended up sweeping to win the ACC title. Geber was on the mound. I think Arguelles, the word from the team there is that, like, Geber, he was great. He was great for them, but Arguelles is even a step up from Geber, which is a very good sign. Griffin was saying yesterday that his fastball is sort of like Graham Fireved's, where it kind of just rises, except it rises and kind of veers to either the right or the left. I don't remember which direction he was saying, but I think Arguelles, like he'll be pretty good.
Yeah, and it's so key to have that 3-man rotation locked down because Virginia Tech, quite frankly, probably the best offensive team in the country last year. You can't expect that every year, right? Mm-hmm. Virginia Tech will not be able to simply outscore every team they play this year. They will need good pitching on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, especially with the meat of the ACC schedule. So having that Sunday starter, I think, could be the difference a lot of times between winning series and losing series on the weekends. In the bullpen, we got putting him on island time, Jonah Hurney, who's been a guy who's been around, thrown a lot of innings. You have a lot of confidence in him to get you some good innings of work. Christian Worley is a guy I'm excited about, along with Henry Weicker and Brady Kurtner. Can they develop as they get older, and have they had stuff? I know Christian Worley had some injury issues that kept him out for a bit, so excited to see him. Another local guy as well with Kurtner, Tyler Dean, throws the ball really, really fast. Mid-90s fastball guy. Needed to develop. He was a highly rated recruit, but it was all potential. Needs to develop. I personally hope we can see some development from him this year. Have you heard anything about him in the preseason?
Yeah, I heard he was pitching really, really well in the fall. And then Jack Hurley hit him with like a 105 mile an hour comebacker that kind of knocked him out and kept him out of the fall scrimmage games that I guess they played against Radford and Liberty. But I heard his development was coming along rather well. Chef said that, obviously Hurney, Worley, Weicker, Siverling, even they'll be all stones. Kieran Higgins, he'll be stones too in the bullpen. Yep. But he expects that Brady Kurtner, whose fastball just somehow acts like a cutter, like his fastball is, it's wicked. It's got wicked movement. Like he expects Kurtner to step up, and so did Tyler Dean as well. I'm trying to think who else. And for a freshman arm, he expects Andrew Sentlinger, a lefty from Charlotte, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think Chef thinks that he'll, play a role on weekends, and then same thing with Griffin Stieg, who got a lot of draft hype. He's a freshman from Northern Virginia. Didn't end up getting picked. Came to Blacksburg as a two-way guy. They've kind of just decided to say, hey, just let's stick with the arm, which will probably be beneficial for him, come draft time in 3 or 4 years. And then Ryan Kennedy, who's not to confuse him with the other Ryan Kennedy who graduated last year that was on the team that was the midweek guy, but Ryan Kennedy, this one's a righty. He went to Colgan High School. He played with the Stars and Mike Colangio's organization up there. He should factor in as the midweek starter.
Yeah, and what I get from so many Virginia Tech fans who start watching baseball and talking about the team, one thing they say is they're like, oh man, the bullpen. Like, what are they doing with the bullpen? What are they doing? Why are they making so many changes? Why don't they have a consistent rotation with guys? Every single college baseball program has this problem. There are only so many scholarships to give out. Also, you don't have elite arms coming in and throwing 97 out of the bullpen. Like, those guys are in the majors. They're not here in college baseball. And
those guys in the majors were starters in college.
Yes, exactly. So, having kind of to piece together a bullpen and use analytics to figure out matchups and understand, all right, guys need rest. Guys can't pitch, back to back to back days out of the bullpen, stuff like that. Every program kind of has to deal with that. That's kind of the beauty of college baseball, is you have to piece some things together as you go along. So before you complain about the pitching rotation going into this season, I think don't think about it like you're watching the Nationals or the Orioles. Think about it as you're kind of watching a ragtag group of guys who can throw really hard, have some good stuff, and are continually working on their game. The bullpen's not pretty in college baseball. Nope. Some programs have one or two good guys. Rarely do you have a fully fledged, bullpen out of the way. So just know that going in, if you're going to start watching college baseball for the first time, makes for a lot of fun. Overall, for this roster, there are some things that we're really confident about. First off, my number one thing about this team is they're going to be a lot of fun, because these guys play baseball with some incredible energy. They are returning some good leadership too, which I think is really key, and something that I've seen on Twitter and talking to people. Fans are a little bit worried about losing all those draft picks, losing some of your senior leaders.
Yeah, it's tough losing half your lineup. You lost, I think, 5 out of your 9 regular starters, which are 6, including Carter Hartigan, who, he didn't have the best statistical year, but man, he came up with a bunch of clutch 2-out hits. That guy was fun to watch. But I think Chef and the staff, Elbin Fecto and Kyle Sarazin, who's the analytics guy there, they put together another great set of offense. Obviously, they're not going to hit 126 homers again. I heard from 2 scouts, from 2 buddies who said, they were like, we wouldn't even come to watch to scout Tech. We would come because they were fun to watch. Like, that offense was probably maybe one of the top 15, 20 offenses ever assembled in college baseball. Like that, I don't know if you'll ever see that again at Virginia Tech, but this group, and Carson DeMartini said it yesterday, expect lower scoring games. You're not going to go out and beat a team 18-2. Obviously it might happen once or twice, but expect a 6-3 win. I go back to that Louisville series where they won those 2 games that they did on Saturday, Sunday, and they only won those games by like two or 3 runs, and it was like a 6-4 final on Saturday and like a 6-3 final or something like that. Expect those games. Even the Friday game, that series, actually, that was another close game that kind of got away from them at the end. But if you go back and watch that Louisville series, I think that's what will kind of that'll be Virginia Tech baseball this season. The pitching staff is, what Chef said, as deep as it's ever been. That he's been here, and certainly in his career. And then the offense, it's still it'll still be a good offense. Like you have Carson DeMartini, he's coming back. Jack Hurley, Carson Jones, Garrett Michelle, who's apparently Babe Ruth. I mean, even Sam Tackett should make an impact. Malinowski, who had 8 homers in 12 games begin the year last year before he kind of fell off. I mean, David Bryant. I mean, the offense this year, it won't be as great, but I mean, they'll still be pretty good.
Yeah, it should be a really fun team to watch. They do lose a bit on the base paths by losing Gavin Cross, Nick Biddison, and Tanner Schobel. So we'll see how they can kind of replace that. Carson Jones is a guy who came on at the end. He certainly can steal base with the best of them, Jack Hurley as well. So I think that's something that some guys will need to step up in their game, is the ability on the base paths. It's something Tech was so good at last year that they'll need guys to kind of continue that tradition. Let's talk about some of these transfers they've gotten, because I think John Sheff has done a great job, and quite frankly, the whole staff, not just Coach Sheff, but of getting guys who not only are really good baseball players, but they come in and fit the high energy, high octane culture of Virginia Tech baseball really well. And it looks like they got some of those guys again this year.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Canizaro, he's not going to be. I saw someone said, "Oh, he's a replacement for Gavin Cross," and no, that's not exactly who he is. He's not going to come in and be, the 9th overall pick, but he's a solid replacement for Gavin Cross, someone who can hit for a high average, doesn't strike out, walks a lot, has some speed on the base path, which is what you just mentioned. I think Canizaro will be. I mean, he's going to be a fine replacement for Cross. And he'll hit for some power too. He don't be surprised to see him, have an 8, 9, 10 homer season, but he'll be all right. He should fit right in the ACC. And then David Bryant, who was at Radford, I don't think he ever hit below 300 there. His last 2 years, I tweeted it the other day on my Twitter account that he had walked like 42 times in the last 2 years and only had struck out like 37. He'll be a guy who constantly gets his bat on the ball, hustling baseballs out. I'm sure. I don't know if he's as quick as Tanner Schobel. I haven't watched that as closely base running, but maybe if he steals half as many bags as Tanner Schobel did, he'll definitely be a fine replacement for Tanner. And then Eddie Iser, if you go back to him, he's not exactly a 5-tool guy, but I think he'll have a decent bit of power strip that comes in this season. And then one guy we haven't mentioned, Chris Sparber, who transferred from a junior college. I think he hit like in the high 390s, almost 400 for his JUCO last year. He's a catcher that plays outfield and can DH. He's someone that, I don't know if he'll get a ton of at-bats. He's a solid bat. He's a solid bat, but I don't know who he's going to take, those at-bats from. But if he's in the lineup, I wouldn't be surprised to see him produce.
We've talked a bit about some of these freshmen coming in, and maybe you can talk to them in this next question, but which position group are you most confident in going into this season?
Position group among position players or pitchers?
Let's go all of it. Which one?
Okay. I would say pitching. Like it is so deep that they brought back. I mean, you have Kieran Higgins, who was an All-American, preseason All-American by the NCBWA. I mean, Jonah Hurney, like he was, in contention for the Sunday guy. He'll be pretty good again. Henry Weicker, who kind of saved the day in the BC Sunday game and in the UVA Sunday game too. And I mean, you bring back Matthew Siverling, who missed all of last year, but he was one of the most effective relief arms in 2021. Mm-hmm. And then Christian Worley, again, I mean, he's going out. He's going to be on draft radars this spring. I think he threw like 16 consecutive shutout innings at the end of last year. He really came on. I think it was the JMU game at the very end where he started to have that scoreless streak and he lost it. I think like in the Wright State regional game, but it was 16 straight innings where he hadn't allowed a run. And then you just go back to the rotation. I mean, you have 3 solid guys, 3 solid starters, something that Tech didn't have to begin the year last year. I mean, you got Griffin Green, and Drew Hackenberg, the pair won, I think, 15 ACC games when they started last year. I mean, they guided Tech to those wins. And then Anthony Arguelles, who, kind of struggled out of the Miami bullpen if you look at the overall numbers, but he had a great Cape Cod summer where I think his ERA was under 2 in 4 starts. So I think the pitchers is probably the most confident group I'm in.
For me, it's the outfield. When you look across that outfield and you have let's just talk fielding. I think Carson Jones is a really underrated player in the field. He's a long, lanky guy who has really good speed. He's going to be able to make up a lot of ground there in right field. And then Jack Hurley moving back to center field, who's at left field last year. If he can get it under, it is kind of a windy stadium in the outfield. It's pretty tough. It's something that Gavin Cross was so good at as an experienced player. I think if Jack Hurley can feel comfortable in that spot, he has all of the tools. He can throw, he can catch, he can run. Like, he's got all the tools as long as he feels comfortable back there. And if Cannizaro is what we think he is as a solid replacement, you're looking at a really good defensive outfield. So I think that's the position group that I feel pretty confident in, because I know those guys can hit already. Mm-hmm. It's, can they be solid in the outfield at a hitter-friendly park at Virginia Tech too? So not only friendly for Virginia Tech, but who they're playing. So you need to make sure that you're good on the defense in the outfield.
Yeah, just going back to Hurley. I mean, him in center. I mean, he played in center for probably all, if not most, of in center his entire freshman year. So I mean, he's going back there. It's not like he's starting fresh from left field for 2 years, but and then going to center. Like he'll be, his adjustment will be just fine.
What position group needs to step up?
That's tough. I mean, my vote would be none. I think this team is complete. And I'm not saying that as a fan. I'm not saying purely like from an objective, space. Like, it is. I think this is a pretty complete team. But if you had to name one, maybe catcher, because I mean, Gary Giebel, like, he should be. He's solid defensively. He was very solid last year when he played for Cade Hunter. In the days that Cade would DH in those midweeks, he played a very solid defense. The bat, it wasn't great, but you also have to chalk that up to maybe because he only got like 20 some at bats last year. He never got consistent at bats, but watching him in last fall and a little bit in the spring, his bat does seem to come around, but maybe somewhere where maybe catcher is probably the weakest link on this team, if you even have one.
Yeah, I think that's one really good thing about this team is the depth. There's a lot of options at places. I think if they need an area where they need to step up, I think what made this team so dominant offensively last year was it was 1 through 9 could do everything. They could hit for average. They could hit for power. They were a threat on the bases. They were tough to strike out. That's what made them so good last year. I think some guys becoming more complete batters like Gary Giebel, Eduardo Malinowski is a guy who started the season really well with a lot of power and then kind of tailed off. Can he get back to the first half of the season, Eduardo Malinowski? I think those things will kind of need to happen for Virginia Tech to reach the levels that they did last year. You'll need some guys to step up offensively to kind of round out that whole starting 9.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to Malinowski, who struggled a little bit going down the line, but Tech doesn't win that Liberty game where they walked it off here at English. He had the game tying hit. They don't win one of the two Duke games where he homers in. I mean, that too is, his glove was so good last year.
Yep.
He and Schobel,
really, really good.
That was really when his bat was kind of off. He was making a positive impact on defense.
Let's talk about the schedule as we start to project out for this year. The ACC is an absolute infinity gauntlet, because Virginia Tech is the 14th ranked team in the country. They're the third highest ranked ACC team. Wake Forest is at number 6, and they have been building that program really well the last couple years. We'll get into them a little bit later. North Carolina is at number 12. Vance Honeycutt is probably an All-American level player. He's the preseason ACC Player of the Year. Louisville, another dominant program, is at number 16. UVA at number 19. NC State at number 21. Miami at number 22. And just outside looking in, Florida State, Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame. All of those schools are projected to make the NCAA tournament. That is 10 ACC, 10 of the 14 ACC programs are projected to make the NCAA tournament. 11 of the SEC programs are expected. So second only to the SEC in that. Let's just talk about the strength of the ACC first. I mean, it's off the charts this year, but that's what you sign up for when you come to Virginia Tech to play baseball.
Yeah, I mean, no kidding. I mean, they'll have series with Wake Forest. They'll have one with North Carolina, UVA. They go down to Miami. And then they have one with Georgia Tech. They don't play Notre Dame this year. Notre Dame will actually be kind of interesting because their head coach, Link Jarrett, just went down to where he's the Florida State guy.
Florida State, yep.
Yeah, and then the VCU head coach came up and became the Notre Dame head coach. So Notre Dame will be interesting this year. I think they'll be pretty good again. But you always got to consider the head coaching change. Maybe that shakes some things up. Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was a very interesting team last year. They started off hot. They were top 15, top 10 maybe team in the country. I don't remember which, but Tech played them when they were ranked, and they swept them, but those games were close. And then Georgia Tech ends up making the tournament. Miami's always good at baseball. I mean, but Tech will go down there this season. Tech last year swept Miami. No. Did they? No, they took 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3.
Last Sunday game. But this time Tech will go down to Miami, where Tech won its first series down there 2 years ago in 2021. The UVA series. That should be fun. That's at English. I think March 31st through April 2nd. I remember the last time they played here in the COVID year, I think you could only have 1,000 people in the stands because it was during the COVID times, but that was probably the loudest crowd up to that point to where I heard English Field. And I'd expect that, Tech is packed once again for each of the UVA games. And then North Carolina, they're going to come up here again, or not again, because Tech went down there last year, but North Carolina comes up here. Tech 2 years ago took their first series from North Carolina in program history. And then the Wake Forest series at the end of the season. That's the very last ACC series Tech will play before the ACC tournament. That'll be interesting because, Wake Forest, will they hold up as, a top 10 team? They returned, I think, 8 or 9 of their starting bats last year, and then the ACC Pitcher of the Year and Rhett Lauder. It wouldn't surprise me for Wake Forest to be pretty good.
Yeah, and we talked about Rhett Lauder. He was the pitcher of the year last year, preseason pitcher of the year this year. If you know who Mike Clevenger is, he looks exactly like Mike Clevenger. And the dude is really fun to watch on the mound. Vance Honeycutt, outfielder from North Carolina, is the preseason player of the year. Very, very talented player. And freshman of the year, they're given to Cam Smith, third baseman from Florida State. Florida State's going to be really interesting because everything points to rebuilding year for the Seminoles, except for the fact that it is Florida State and they're one of the more consistent programs on the East Coast. So they'll be an interesting team to watch. The Hokies, I said, they avoid series with Louisville, NC State, and Notre Dame. I think overall that's a win for the Hokies. Louisville and NC State are both teams that traditionally, especially if you go play on the road, are really, really tough. So I think those are W's for the Hokies that they aren't playing those. Hokies will start the season in a few days here. We're recording this on Valentine's Day in Charleston, South Carolina against College of Charleston, who is no slouch. An instant opportunity to build that tournament resume for the Hokies. College of Charleston is picked to win the CAA this year. They return a lot of pitchers. They return a lot of guys. They should be a pretty good team. You would hope that Virginia Tech's talent level will take a hold in that series, but beginning of the season, playing on the road, not an easy start to the season for Virginia Tech.
Yeah. I'll be down there this weekend to cover it for Tech Sideline. But this is something that Chef said he wanted to do last year. He said he didn't, after Tech's first ACC win against Pitt, he said he didn't set his team up well enough to go down to Georgia Tech and try to take one of those games. He said he had wished he had taken his team on the road to a non-con, to somewhere like Charleston, to play those first 3 non-conference series. So I think this is right on par with what Chef said he wanted to do this year. He said he couldn't do it last year because they made some agreements with who they play, UNC Asheville, Fordham, and
Wright State.
Wright State. They had made some, they made some agreements during COVID to where, they had to keep them as their teams to play in 21. But, he said he wants to go, like he wants to do this. So it's not like, it's Tech got a bad draw to start the season off, but it was more of that the staff wanted to go down there, see how good their team was. I'm a little surprised it's right away. I'm surprised that Charleston's not coming up here and that Tech's not going down to Charlotte. I'm a little surprised by that, but it's a good test right away.
I mean, if I had to choose a place to play a baseball game in mid-February, I would probably choose Charleston over Blacksburg. That's just me, especially if I was playing with a metal bat. But after that 3-game series at College of Charleston, which starts Friday, February 17th, the Hokies will have 13 straight games at English Field. They'll play East Tennessee State on a Tuesday, and then they'll have a series against Bryant, Charlotte, UMass Lowell, and Boston College to start ACC play. Sprinkled in there is, of course, the Sharkies Classic on Tuesday, February 28th against the Radford Highlanders. So it'll be a really tough schedule for the Hokies. They'll be battle tested, but with that comes a lot of opportunities to build that tournament resume, and it's never, ever too early to start building that resume. So it'll be, an interesting start to the season playing College of Charleston, but after that, there are some opportunities for the Hokies to stack some wins up, mess around with the lineup, put some guys in different positions, see what they like before playing Boston College to start ACC play. All right. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm actually very curious to see your answer for this because making it to a super regional in college baseball is no slouch. That is, an incredible, incredible accomplishment. In order for the Hokies to host a super regional again this year, blank needs to happen.
Blank needs to happen. Well, my obvious answer would be win a lot of games, but I think they just got to stay healthy. I mean, that was their key last year was, staying healthy. I think Malinowski's injury at Boston College to where he was only out 2 games. I think, but from what I remember, that's the biggest injury they had until the end of the year. It's all about staying healthy. And, Coach Chef will tell you the exact same thing. Just keep your guys healthy, prepare for the upcoming opponents. Don't put yourself in a bad spot, and you'll win a lot of ball games that way.
Yeah, for me, if I had to pick something, I think they need their starting rotation to stay healthy and to all be really good. I think last year, Virginia Tech kind of ran into the problem where they were trying to outscore teams a little bit, and the pitching was really, really good, but not elite enough to keep good offenses from scoring. And it worked. And then they played an Oklahoma team that was basically hitting with like a tennis racket up there. And they just, it's baseball. You can't be expected to score 12 runs a game. And they just kind of ran out of steam there offensively in a couple games against Oklahoma.
They
scored a whole lot of runs on the second game.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I sort of disagree with, I think they did still have elite starting pitching in Green. Obviously the results weren't there, but I think a lot of it came from fatigue. You know,
Yeah.
Green, I don't think had pitched more than 18 innings this season since high school. Hackenberg hadn't pitched more than 40, and he took the fall. Like he hadn't pitched in the fall before that, and that's what he was saying the other day. Was I'm more prepared. This year not to fall. Kind of fall off the cliff I did. And to be prepared to throw 90, 100, 110 innings again. So that was I don't think the starting pitching it did fall off, but I mean there were definitely factors to where it wasn't just something random. I mean there were a lot of factors went into that.
It'll be interesting to see if they can have somebody step up. Thinking about like a guy like Shane Connolly that came out of nowhere a couple years ago,
Yeah.
and he was basically a half starter, half reliever, part-time closer as well. It'll be interesting to see if they have a guy who can be the get out of jail free card pitcher. I think that'd be a really useful thing to add to this team because we know they'll be able to hit. There'll be a fun offense to watch. Maybe not record breaking, but there'll be a fun offense to watch. Hit me with a record prediction, or I guess a ballpark record prediction for the Hokies, who, by the way, last year went, like we said at the top of the show, 45-14.
I'll give you a number of wins since I can't do the math that quickly in my head. I would say anywhere from in the range from 37 to 42. That would be my range. That would be I don't know if they've won 40. It might be the first time in program history they would win, 40 games in a row, and they're 40 games in 2 consecutive years. What about you? What do you think what's your prediction?
Last year when I did my preview article, I said, I think it's a good team. I think they make the regionals. I was like, to make the regional in the ACC, conference record needs to be about 500, a little bit above, and that will probably get you in. Non-conference, want to win 75-80% of those non-conference games, depending on the schedule. They exceeded those expectations mightily. I don't think you can predict them to go 19-9 in the ACC again. I think you're looking at more of like 16, 17 wins as a more realistic ceiling for this team. But I look at the non-conference schedule and I really like Tech in all those games. College of Charleston would be tough. Liberty is always tough, but I like Virginia Tech I agree with you. That 35 to 38 win range seems like a really realistic goal for this team. And if they get there in a really tough ACC, this could be a team that's not only hosting a regional, but they could be a national seed again, depending if the cards fall the right way. So I think you're going to see a team that is maybe not reaching second and third in the country towards the end of the season, but is definitely competing at a national level. So if I have to place a number of regular season wins, let's go 37. That's the number I'm going with. 37.
It's a solid guess.
We'll set the over under at 36.5. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, I'd take the over. I'd say, anywhere between 37 and 40, 42 on the high end, but 37 on the low end.
It'll be a fun season. I'm really excited for it. How far do you think the Hokies can make it this year?
I mean, it is so hard to top a National 4 seed. It is so hard to do what they did again, just because playoff baseball, regular season baseball, it's so random. Like Oklahoma got hot at the right time. They were a 2 seed and went all the way to a 2 seed in a region in Florida's regional and went all the way to the College World Series where they ended up falling actually in the College World Series final. I wouldn't be surprised if they made a super regional. I don't know if they would host a super regional. Maybe that's probably they certainly have a possibility to with all the baseball randomness, but I could say that I'm confident that Tech is between a top 11 to 14 seed And then on the low end, I think that Tech would make the tournament easily as a two seed.
Yeah, I think that's my postseason prediction. When I was thinking about this was like, one, we know the top of college baseball this year is pretty dominant. We haven't talked nationally, but like LSU might just run through everybody this year. They built an absolute like army of a team this year. I
But
really do think this is a team that can host a regional. And if they're not hosting a regional, will probably be the top number 2 seed.
yeah,
So I think, expecting there to be a regional in Blacksburg is not crazy. Will they host a super regional? I'm going to go ahead and say probably not this year. That's a lot to ask in this schedule. And, especially with some, the SEC is just as deep. Um, there's some good baseball happening out west as well as there always is. So I think it'll be tough for Virginia Tech to get that top 8 seed again, but I could see them getting, the 10 through 14 overall seed seems like a realistic goal for this team.
yeah. It's funny you say LSU runs through everybody. I mean, the key to all this is staying healthy, and LSU just lost their Sunday guy. So
Yep, that news came out last night, I believe.
yeah. So I mean, the key to the run. I mean, Carson DiMartini was saying it yesterday. The end goal, it is Omaha for every single team, but DMart thinks that they've got a shot. They've got a legit shot at going back again, or going back to Omaha, or going to Omaha, not going back.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Let's go to Omaha. I was ready. I was packing my bags. I was getting ready to put in PTO requests to go to Omaha. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that would be awesome to cover. I mean, me and David Cunningham we were getting our travel plans ready for Tech to win that third game and go on to the College World Series. I know that would be so much fun for me personally, and I'm sure it'd be fun for a lot of other people. But to sit in that press box in Omaha would be sick.
I mean, the fact that we're realistically having even hosting a regional conversations in the preseason, I think just shows how far the program has gone in the past couple years. They have literally built it from the ground up, and it should be a really, really exciting season. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you back throughout the season. We'll be doing as regular podcasts for the baseball team this spring as we can, but overall, really, really excited about this season.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course.